Hello and welcome to this video on variable scope. Now, variable scope is a fairly complex thing to understand initially, but once you do understand it, it does become considerably easier to understand. So first of all, variable scope, when you're given a page or when you write a page in Python, it will have several functions within it usually. Each of these functions has its own purpose. And that is what you're programming a function to do. You're programming it to do something that it specifically needs to do. However, within the entire page, you can have something called a global variable as well. Now, a global variable could be a number, it could be a name, it could be, so you could use it as a brand name, you could use it as a way of indicating a setting in the file, for example, something like that. And a global variable will be accessible throughout each of these normal functions, as well as the entire page. Now, because you've got a global function, a global variable, you'll also have local variables, and the local variable will only be available within each of these, within each of the ones which it's declared within. So you declare a global variable outside of the actual individual functions, and it can be used across the entire range of functions within a page. A local variable you declare within an individual function, and once it's been declared, if you go outside of that function, it is no longer accessible. So there are differences between whether you want to use a local or a global. For example, if you were using a global and you change something within one function, it would change it within the entire page, it would change it outside of the function, it would change it everywhere. Whereas if you were to change something, a local variable within a function, it would change within that function, it would be used within that function, but as soon as it came out of the function, that variable would no longer exist. So there's several different uses for this. First of all, with local variables, you can use the same name across various different functions, and they won't interact with each other, they won't contradict each other. However, if you were to use the same name in a global, it would expect you to be meaning the initial one, and if you aren't meaning the initial one, it would overwrite it, and then you'd have a slight problem with the way that your code works, for example, if you weren't expecting it to do that. You would also, with a local variable, you have the ability to sort of change content within a function accidentally and not break your actual code, so it's not intrusive. So because it's not intrusive, if you were to actually make a mistake within a function, if something did go wrong, if you were to just simply go back into that one function, you could find the mistake easily, because usually a function's only a short amount of code compared to the rest of the page. Now, this obviously is still a problem because you are still making a mistake and it's not working as you'd expect it to. However, because it's only within a local function, or a local variable where the mistake is, it's much easier to diagnose and find a problem. If a global variable makes a mistake, it could be in function 1, function 2, function 3, 4, it could be in the actual main body of the page, it could be anywhere. And so when you're using a global, if you make a mistake, it is harder to locate than if you were using a local variable. Now, that's not to say that global variables don't have their uses, because they certainly do. For example, if you were to actually create a page in which it needs to have a certain value as being constant, then that is a very good use for a global, because it can't change anyway, so there's no difference on whether or not it does change. For example, if you were to use a payroll and people got paid a default value per hour, so say $10 an hour, then all you need to do is pass that through to each function which needs it, and it would know by automatically what the actual pay is. You won't have to recreate that variable each time, even because it's staying the same. There's no point in recreating it, you may as well just pass it to all of them. However, if you were to create, say, a number of hours worked, then a global variable could be useful, but it could be hindering as well. It could be useful if that one person's if your page is per person, which it usually will be, so you've got nothing to worry about in that case, then you could say they've worked 4.5 hours a week, and then you could pass that into a a function, and you could check whether that number of hours worked as overtime. If it is overtime, you could give them a different rate, that sort of thing. So therefore, a global variable would be useful in that case. So there are different uses between whether you want it to be global or local, and if you do decide to go global, just make sure that you are using the variable name only when you actually mean to use that variable name, and if you do need to create something locally to give it a different name, otherwise you will have the problem of it overwriting your global and changing how it affects the rest of all your functions as well. So thank you for watching. I'm Alex Bowes from LearnToProgram.tv, and I'll see you soon.